Welcome to Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. I'm Rob Wilson.
I am Tony the Quano.
Today we're going to be talking about the 1989 classic, one of my all-time favorite movies that I grew up watching, and the inspiration for the name of this podcast, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So, Tony, tell me, do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
You know what? I actually don't. I have this vague memory of when the sequel came out, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And more what I remember from that was my brother having seen Bill and Ted, but we didn't have VHS of it. So the movie was mostly unknown to me at that time. And I don't think it was really close to the high school when it kind of came more like something that I actually knew more about. Just funny, by that point, Keanu Reeves was kind of a well-established star between Speed and then finally, the Matrix movies and Point Break as well. Which is weird because it comes out releases 2 years after Bill and Ted. And his characters are vastly different in age.
Yep, they are.
So it would have been about that time, probably in high school, that kind of at some point. So that was funny. It was goofy. I don't think it made a big impression on me at that point, for whatever reason. Whatever night it might have been when I was watching it. It wasn't until college at some point when I watched it where I thought it was hilarious. Okay. And it's one of those movies, for me, it's kind of hard to pin down. We can get that shortly. So yeah, it was definitely a bit later. And I kind of knew it as kind of Keanu Reeves by that point, by the time I really got into it, as kind of his breakthrough American movie. He was in Dangerous Liaisons the year before that, which is a totally opposite movie, too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so I don't remember exactly how old I was when I first saw it. I know I was young. It was early 90s when I first saw it. So yeah, I was maybe 6, 7 years old. And
I do think the thing that I remember at that point when my brother was talking about it, seeing the poster.
Yeah.
And them sitting on a phone.
Yep.
Which that was in my memory well before I actually saw it.
But yeah, I have a vague memory of being with my brother at his friend's house, and we were watching it. That's the earliest I remember having seen it. And I've loved it from that moment on. It's just, I watched it all throughout my childhood, over and over. Could quote just about every line.
I'm glad you brought up the quotes, because the thing I was kind of thinking about on this was just some of the use of adverbs in this movie.
Yes. Yes.
It's hilarious. I don't even know where they went now, but we're going to flunk this class most heinously. Not just the adverb. They use the superlative
superlative.
Most.
Yes, most heinously.
Not just heinously, most heinously. And there's even things like, I don't know, when you're 10 years old watching that, you're thinking oh yeah, most heinously is the funniest line of all time.
But yeah.
There's a lot there to laugh at. What I want to know, I'm thinking about this, since I mentioned poster with the phone booth, and now, I remember, seeing that you have the Doctor Who poster behind you.
Which, as I said, phone booth clearly is an homage reference to Doctor Who.
Yes. Which I don't think, because it has been a few years since I've seen it, and I think the last time I saw it was probably before I saw the more modern Doctor Who's, so I was like, oh yeah, that's what that is, right? It's because it is bigger on the inside. Yeah, they cram a lot.
Yeah, they cram a lot of people in it. And the funny thing is, I was watching, because I watched it on the recent 4K release of it, right? Because I got the 4K Blu-ray when it came out, and there's a making of documentary on that. After I rewatched the movie the other day, I watched that documentary. It's about an hour long. It was real interesting. And yeah, they had times when they had half the phone booth or whatever, depending on the shot, how much they needed in the camera, to sort of create a little bit more room in there for everybody. But a lot of the time, they actually just crammed everybody in there. in the full size, just normal sized phone booth. They crammed like 8 or 9 people in there. However many there were. And they were talking about how it was getting so hot in there, and everything was getting all swampy, and how it could have been so easy for them to, especially for the shots that it was just like from the top half, how they could have just put some, air conditioner vents going in through the bottom to cool the place up, but they didn't.
Think about, like Genghis Khan and Abraham Lincoln being in full get-ups like that,
Yeah. And Joan of Arc, when she's in her full armor.
I did not realize. That's funny. That's a good good effect to have. It's funny because it's like obviously absurd, and you have your fantasy elements of it because obviously time travel movie.
Yeah, but also something
there's a realism to a lot of things within the movie.
Yeah, but also one of the things that since it was released on 4K, I don't know if you've heard of this. About this, but someone has noticed an Easter egg that was never noticed before because the resolution wasn't good enough to see it. And after reading an article about that a few weeks ago, I made sure to keep an eye out for it when I was watching it. And in the future, that those 3 people that are sort of hovering, the 3 elders in the future that are sort of hovering over that platform, there is one shot in the entire movie. It lasts about maybe a second tops, probably closer to half a second, where at the beginning of the movie, when they first create the phone booth time machine and Rufus gets in it, as he's dropping down into the floor to travel through time, when the lights are flashing, one of those flashes of light shines up onto the platform that they're hovering over.
Okay.
And you see the Circle K logo, which means they're hovering over a model of the Circle K. Where everything started. But it's just a brief flash that is just the very beginning of the movie.
That's a really cool detail.
That it was the resolution apparently was not good enough for people to notice it before the 4K release.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that you say it because that's the line. Like for the first time I've seen the movie,
strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K. And I guess before I hit Keanu on this, it's funny. I have very specific memories about Circle K's actually. In my grandparents' house in Arizona. Anyway, but yeah, that entire opening sequence though, I was thinking about it, watching it this time. As with any time travel movie, you're gonna have certain grounded, dated aspects of things that tell you, okay, you have your set year this is taking place, right? Because that needs to be communicated.
Yeah, they mentioned plenty of times in the first few minutes of the movie that it took place in 1988.
But it's funny because watching it, obviously the thing is a phone booth, which feels very dated now. Doctor Who can really get away with it because of being so classic and always traveling through time.
By the way, for you youngsters who are listening, a phone booth was a big glass box that you used to walk into that had a payphone in it. That if you needed to make a call when you were out before cell phones came around, you could go in there, put a quarter in, and make a call.
And even for Rob and I, or host, for us, because we grew up in the burbs.
Oh, and by the way, before we continue, spoiler alert for everything that we're talking about in this. We're going to talk about the whole movie. So it's been almost 40 years since this movie came out. So
yeah,
if you're concerned about spoilers with it, I'm sorry.
There are kids that there are people that were born when this movie came out that have kids that are in high school now. So.
Yeah.
He might be one of them. I don't know. Which is weird because I'm older than this movie. I don't have high school kids, which I'm okay with.
Yeah. Hey, I'm older than this movie and I don't have any kids. So.
But it's funny. It's it's obviously they ground certain things within the time period. Makes sense. And it's funny, there's certain things they kind of harken towards, but still doesn't feel dated to me.
No, right? It doesn't.
When they talk, you talk about the opening scene, in some ways, it made me think a lot of Superman 2.
Yeah. Yep.
But instead of Terrence Stamp, you have George Carlin in a very not George Carlin-esque type role.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he played it straight the whole time.
Yeah. No, he plays it perfectly. But, he does it straight. There's a goofiness to it, but there's enough, like you said, like him playing it straight, a lot of other people playing things straight enough that it doesn't feel like it's a complete spoof and send-up. It's just another time travel.
Yeah. And also, it's interesting because in the documentary that's in the making of documentary that's with the 4K, I don't know if it's on any of the other releases of it, but it may be on some of them. But Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter talk about how they were so happy when George Carlin was cast because it meant that their movie was legit. Every time that they had a scene with him, they got so excited because they knew that as long as George Carlin was involved in it, everything was going to be okay and the movie was going to turn out great. So, like when they in that scene at the Circle K, when they talk to themselves.
Like, listen to this dude.
Yeah, when they're like, listen to this dude. When they walk out of the time machine and they see him and they're all excited to see him, that's a real reaction.
That's good. But who would have thought that, like, you think about that, like, Keanu Reeves becomes, like, a famous movie actor.
Yeah.
And Alex Winter,
I mean,
but he has this. He has this series.
He has this, and he's done other stuff. He just hasn't been, like, real mainstream with his projects. But I don't remember what he's done. I think he did more like behind the scenes stuff, like behind the camera stuff since then. I don't know. I was listening a few years ago. I was listening to a podcast where they were talking to him and he was talking about what he's done since Bill and Ted. He's actually been very active, just nothing that has been really newsworthy.
Especially lately, he's done a lot of directing like documentaries, which is interesting. We talk about him. Like he was in The Lost Boys prior to this, which would have been, he would have had more of an actual role as opposed to Keanu Reeves. Which, do you know what Keanu Reeves did in the 80s before he began acting?
What's that?
He was a news correspondent on like a kids' news show in Canada.
Wow, I've got to. Oh, we have to try to get a hold of some of those.
There
some
are
of those
YouTube
clips.
videos out there of him.
Oh, we got to find him. We got to find him.
I can look very quickly at what it's called. Going Great. It was a program on the CBC, which is like the BBC, Canada's BBC version, right? And then he eventually started doing some stage productions, and then he got into like film acting.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
But this was it. And it's funny because, like, obviously if you've seen Keanu Reeves movies, there's not a lot of range within what he does. He's just at least his early movies. There.
He's gotten a lot more range more recently, in more recent years.
I actually kind of think
but his first several movies.
Ted has range.
He does.
But he also has the perfect Keanu reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also why he was perfect for Neo and The Matrix.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, there's just something about the movies that are able to work in the whoa.
Anyway, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, I guess we haven't talked a lot about the plot yet.
Yeah, no, we haven't talked about it.
It's a time travel movie. I think you've caught on to that. It's a time travel movie.
Time travel movie.
And it's not really a spoof of them. And actually, I think it does well of actually not complicating, obviously, time travel role.
Yeah. I mean, it's a time travel movie. It's not a spoof. If anything, other than just its own thing, it's an homage to time travel movies.
I would agree with that. It's a comedic, goofy homage to time travel movies. Whereas I think, we did, we recently did Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is more of a homage. It spoofs up zombie movies a little bit. Hot Fuzz spoofs the buddy action.
Yes.
It's different than that.
But yeah, I mean, Bill and Ted it's got its own self-contained story that it's really a genius premise.
No, it really is. it's the perfect catalyst to do what it wants to do.
Because I mean, the movie starts out. You got Bill and Ted. There are a couple of students that are struggling in their history class. They're not these stoner kids. No, they're not stoner kids, but later movies would put them as stoners. But this is before the whole stoner culture.
They're kind of slackers.
Yeah, they're slackers,
but slackers. But
they're not the brightest.
Don't have the proper motivation.
Yeah. I mean, they're both very intelligent. They're just they don't have the motivation to really use their intelligence for school. But so they are given a history project. They have to give an oral report in front of the school and describe how all these different historical figures
would view
the modern world in San Dimas, California.
Yeah, that's also very important. That their particular part of the world.
Yes.
Which actually is a very good history project.
It is. It really is. So they're supposed to give this oral report and explain, in their thought process, in their opinion,
Socrates,
about how all these Socrates or Socrates or Billy the Kid or Joan of Arc or Abraham Lincoln, how each of these people, if they were alive today, what they would think about modern day, 1988 San Dimas, California. But if they don't get an A on their oral report, they're both going to fail history. And so then Ted has the added struggle of if he fails history, his dad's going to send him to military school in Alaska. His dad is the police captain in San Dimas.
One of my favorite tiny points of this, military academy in Alaska.
Yes, in Alaska. Oates Military Academy, to be exact, in Alaska.
Everyone knows that if you want to send your kid to the best military academy, you send them to Alaska.
Yes. But that was also back in the day when, really, the late 80s, early 90s, the big parental threat to get their kids to straighten up is, I'm going to send you to military school. Yeah.
I don't know if parents still threaten that way.
I haven't heard any do that recently, but people, they used to.
Military schools are still out there. They still exist.
Yeah, they still exist, but it's not really a good threat anymore to threaten to send your kid to military school if they don't straighten up.
Why is it dumb?
I mean, there was a time when I was a kid that I was legitimately concerned that if I messed up too bad, I'd be sent to military school. Because all these movies made it out to be such a bad thing. Such a big punishment.
What's even worse is if you watch Child's Play 3, there's this evil doll.
Yes, at the military school.
Live ammo into the guns that they're doing drills with. It was a different time. Vietnam, Nam. Anyway,
because if the parents couldn't whip you into shape, couldn't get you back on the straight and narrow, the military definitely could.
But Ted has that pressure. Yeah, Bill's just distracted.
Yeah, Bill's just distracted. Dad's
banging.
Because his dad, his new stepmom is only 3 years older than he is. She was a senior when Bill and Ted were freshmen.
And she wants him to call her mom.
Yes, she wants him to call her mom instead of Missy.
Is that his dad is obviously screwing her on his bed?
Yes, that was made blatantly obvious when Bill and Ted are in Bill's room and they're trying to come up with ideas for their history report. Missy comes in with burnt grilled cheese so that they can have a snack, and then Bill's dad comes in. Gives them some money and sends them off to go get some snacks at Circle K.
And crazy how immaculate that house is.
Yeah.
It's very clean. The lawn is very nice. The flowers are very well kept. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that's possible.
I mean, there is the one scene where Missy is out, watering the flowers and stuff.
Maybe it's because she wants to water them that way in case anyone comes by and sees her little booty.
Maybe. Maybe she was just waiting for a phone booth full of historical figures to show up right behind her and materialize on top of the hose.
I still want to know what Bill's dad does, because she obviously has a thing for teachers. You see scenes where she's still hitting on her prior teachers.
Yeah, because she definitely makes eyes at the history teacher, who was her history teacher when she was in high school a few years ago. But they never explain what Bill's dad does. Ted's dad's the police chief, or the police captain.
Yeah, that's very clear. He has no idea where his keys are, which is a very important plot point.
very important plot point that he can't find his keys.
But they're obviously both distracted, right? It makes sense. Like, they're afraid they're going to flunk. They don't want to flunk. They want to be good students. They want to succeed, right? You see that early on in the movie.
Bill's dealing with the fact that his stepmom, he went to high school with her. And that's awkward.
His dad just sends him off to the Circle K to eat dinner.
Yep. Well, he shuts Bill's bedroom door and locks it with him and Missy in it, and everybody knows what they're going to do in there. Ted even comments on it.
He's got to be doing something well worth it if she's... Anyway. So they go off to the Circle K, and they have a visitor. Well, first, they're actually quizzing people in the Circle K.
Yeah.
Do you know who Genghis Khan?
Do you know when the Mongols ruled China? That lady that's walking up there. Hey, I'm sorry, kid. I just work here.
Can't you see, like, we haven't brought this guy up before. We have a friend, Tim.
Yes, Tim. Why hasn't Tim made a mention here yet?
I could see him.
We're in our 7th episode, and we have not mentioned Tim yet.
Parking lot of the gas station, asking, "Do you know when the Mongols ruled China?" He could tell you who won the 1963 Stanley Cup.
Yeah, if it has to do with hockey,
who their starting defensemen were.
Tim has an encyclopedic knowledge of everything hockey.
Keanu Reeves might have that too. He is Canadian.
He is Canadian. But yeah, I could totally see Tim out there asking random people outside Circle K. Do you know when did the Mongols rule China?
It's really actually appropriate. Someone that struggled with school. He didn't want to struggle with school.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to do well. It's not like some of these other kids out there that would have to face a situation like this where he needs to pass a test. But then thankfully there's intervention. Not divine intervention. There's intervention.
No, there's intervention from the future. Rufus, played by George Carlin, shows up in a phone booth that drops out of the sky. And turns out that phone booth is a time machine. And it can take Bill and Ted to any point in time in the history of the universe.
They can go backwards,
history
forwards.
Or future. And so he takes the time machine with them so that they can go and actually learn from history itself to be able to ace their oral report. And so he takes them on their first trip to sort of show them the ropes and teach them how to use the time machine. They end up going to France, but it's during the reign of Napoleon. Yeah. Well, they show up in the middle of a war, in the middle of a battle.
Yeah, it's in France.
And
it's 1805.
Yes, 1805.
And he's fighting Austria.
And so when they show up, Napoleon spots them, tells his troops to blow them up, and they see the cannons start getting pointed at them, so they get back in the phone booth, and they activate it to travel back to the present time to 1988. Meanwhile, at the same time, Napoleon, an explosion goes up right next to him and launches him right to where the time machine is, and he falls through the portal that was created. So he's sort of flowing through the circuits of time behind the time machine. And when they return to 1988, Napoleon ends up falling and landing in a tree right outside of the time machine.
Right. And they could have taken him with them.
They could have.
Take everyone else with them.
Because, I mean, their original plan was just to go and learn from the different time periods.
Right, learn from them, talk with them.
And then when they realized that Napoleon hitched a ride back with them, they decided, okay, well, let's go ahead and go and collect historical figures and bring them back and let them see how modern-day San Dimas is. And then we can actually get an accurate report from them.
They leave Napoleon with Ted's younger...
Yes, with Ted's younger brother, Deacon.
Normal name, Deacon.
Well, I mean, you got to wonder, though. So, Bill and Ted, you got Bill S. Preston, Esquire, is what he calls himself. And then Ted Theodore Logan. Is Theodore actually his middle name? Like, is he Theodore Logan? Or is Theodore, the middle Theodore is more of like a, in quotes, like a nickname, just an add-on to his name, Ted Theodore Logan. Right. That's never explained.
That's not.
But together they are Wild Stallions, the band, the rock band Wild Stallions.
They want to be like Van Halen.
Yes, but they don't know how to play any instruments.
They just make a lot of noise in the garage.
They are trying to make a triumphant music video, but they can't make a triumphant video without Eddie Van Halen, and they can't get Eddie Van Halen without a triumphant video. So that's their dilemma.
Terrific circular logic. Very sound.
But yeah, so they get this idea to go around and collect historical figures and bring them back to 1988 to see what they think of San Dimas.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it is.
They got a time machine. They don't have a lot of time, but they have a time machine.
Because time still goes on as normal in modern day San Dimas while they're traveling through time.
Which I like.
Yes. You know, at one point when they come back to meet past Bill and Ted at the Circle K, they think they have 10 hours before their report, but they really have 2 hours because Ted forgot to wind his watch. Because time still passes normally in modern day.
They still warn themselves, remember, to wind and watch.
And then he still forgets.
Even though they know it's not going to happen.
But, the first actual, person that they knowingly take with them is Billy the Kid.
And it's a whole Wild West brawl type of thing. And I always think it's actually, Billy the Kid's kind of an interesting figure for all of them to bring back. You know, he's very, one of the ones that, influence throughout history, and then you just have Billy the Kid.
And I love how they first get to the Old West. Well, first off, the time machine winds up. It comes in right between two outhouses, so it looks like it's a third outhouse. But when they walk into the saloon, they walk over to the bar, and Bill orders 2 beers. Just big smile on his face. 2 beers, please. Yep. And the bartender just gives them 2 beers. They're clearly teenagers, but it's the Old West.
They're clearly wearing very different clothes.
Yeah, it's the Old West. You know, they didn't really care about things like that in the Old West. So, obviously, they don't get carded or anything like that. And Bill and Ted are surprised that they got beer with no trouble.
So
Bill's like, we got to remember this place.
It made me think another movie we'll have to do was The Three Amigos.
Yes.
When they go get tequila.
Yes. Yes.
They order beer.
When they get tequila. It's like beer.
No beer.
Just tequila. What's tequila? It's like beer.
They were also clearly out of place.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to do that movie one of these days. But so they, Billy the Kid comes in and they, he's looking for 2 people to join his poker team. And so, of course, Bill and Ted volunteer to help him to play poker with him. He gets caught cheating and there's a big barroom brawl. And so as they're trying to run out there, they convince Billy the Kid to go with them. And they all get in the time machine and travel back to ancient Greece with all the columns and stairs. It was most tranquil.
And it's shot. Most tranquil. Again, use of adverbs.
Yes. It's most tranquil.
But they meet Socrates.
Yes, they meet Socrates, who they just saw his name written in their history book, so they pronounce it Socrates. So they meet Socrates while he's up there talking to the people. He's got a big basin of sand that he's talking about how time is like the sands of an hourglass.
So, in response, they quote Kansas.
Yes. So, since Bill and Ted don't speak ancient Greek.
That's right.
They have to communicate with him somehow. So, Ted tells Bill to recite him some lyrics. So, Bill picks up a handful of sand and he tells him, all we are is dust in the wind, dude.
In the wind.
All we are is dust in the wind.
Socrates finds this to be profound.
So then he quotes the Days of Our Lives slogan. Like the sands of the hourglass, so are the days of our lives.
And I just gotta say, probably Napoleon, Socrates, I think 2 of them become my favorite of all the figures they have. Especially with Socrates, because he seems like a very stoic Greek philosopher, very intellectual.
And throughout the movie,
he and Bill and Ted come in, they upended a bit.
And throughout the movie,
watch his journey on this adventure.
Yeah, and he and Billy the Kid become best friends.
Best friends.
Socrates and Billy the Kid, they bond.
That later are terrific.
And funny thing, Dan Shore, the guy who played Billy the Kid, when he was first cast as Billy the Kid, they didn't really tell him a whole lot about, how to play the part or anything like that. So he did his research. He researched Billy the Kid, found out that, he had syphilis and all this stuff. He was a syphilitic gunslinger. And so when he came in the first day of shooting, he started playing him like he had syphilis. He's sort of twitching a little bit and, acting like he's sick. And so they stopped him and they're like, no, we're going to forget about all that. Just play him like a cowboy. So, okay. So basically forget all the research you did. We're just going to play him like a cowboy. It's great that you did all this research and you learned so much about him, but we're just not going to worry about any of the actual real life details of this guy.
Even though he's supposed to be a historical figure in a history book.
Yeah.
Sadly, by the way, the actor who played Socrates, Tony Steedman, has passed away about 20 years ago.
I mean, he was old in '88 when they filmed the movie, so it's not really surprising that 33 years later he's passed in that time.
He did have a role in the mid-'90s. There was an Iron Man TV series, right? Iron Man series. He played the voice of Justin Hammer in that.
Oh, I used to watch that show.
For most of you, we might have encountered Justin Hammer and Iron Man 2.
Yes.
By Sam Rockwell. But anyway.
But, yeah, we're talking about, way back in the 1900s when we were kids.
He didn't have a whole lot else. And I was trying to look this up. I was just thinking about this. Because there's several of the historical figures that are older in that movie. Mm-hmm. I was just kind of wondering, they passed on. I think George Carlin has passed on.
Yes. That was a sad day.
Yeah, Dan Shore is the actor that played Billy the Kid. He was also in Tron.
Yes, he was.
82 Tron.
Great movie. Another one we need to do.
Great movie, which we'll have to do also. Yeah. And I guess part of it is actually some of the animation in the movie made me think of Tron in a way.
Yeah.
Just the effects and the way they did the animation. Yeah.
Especially through the Circus of Time.
Yeah, it's the 80s.
In those sections. Yeah.
It's okay. I can live with that. So they bring back Socrates, and they have Socrates, they have Billy the Kid, Napoleon's with Deacon.
Yeah, Napoleon's with Deacon going on their adventures. Deacon takes him bowling.
Which is funny. And, we'll get to that.
Oh, actually, no. First, I guess he takes him to get ice cream. And Deacon, somehow, this somewhat nerdy kid, he takes Napoleon to get ice cream, and Deacon's got 2 girls with him.
Yes, he does.
Deacon does not strike me as the kind of guy who would have female friends that he'd just go and, hang out with at the ice cream shop.
This is also what I want to know. So it's a school night.
Especially back in the 80s when nerd was like...
Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, when nobody liked a nerd. And I mean, he wasn't clearly a nerd, but he was he was a little bit nerdy, but Definitely. He wasn't your stereotypical nerd.
This is the detail I want to know about that before we get back to Bill and Ted. So they drop Napoleon off with him. 9, 10 o'clock at night. Not it's a school night, not super late, but it's late. And then the next day's a school day. And
so you just play
this kid is bringing Napoleon to an ice cream parlor, a bowling alley. And then later we see him playing baseball. Anyway, that's for later. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, you're right.
Meanwhile, we're seeing later that, these history projects are happening.
Yeah, because the next day is clearly a school day because the next day is when the history report is due.
Yeah. It's not like the history report's due on a Monday, and they're missing over an entire
Friday.
Weekend.
It's probably a Friday when it's due.
Yeah.
Because reports like that a lot of times are due on Fridays.
Yes. Anyway, one little point that I find kind of puzzling. So they have Socrates, Billy the Kid. Next thing they do is they go into medieval England.
Where they meet the beautiful babes of England. They meet the princesses that earlier at the Circle K, future Ted told current Ted to give his love to the princesses. And so they see those princesses that Ted was talking about.
And it's weird because, it's I don't really say the year, but you understand it's 1200. And then all of a sudden they drop out of the sky. Some weird peasant dude sees this. And they see the princesses. The princesses see them. We find out the princesses are going to be married to these
royal ugly dudes.
Royal ugly dudes. But, even before we find that out, one of my favorite parts of the movie is they have this project they're about to fail.
Yeah, and they decide to take a detour.
Time is of the essence. Rufus emphasizes that.
Yeah, and they decide to take a detour to try to pick up some princesses. With suits of armors and swords. To decide to recreate Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back.
Pick up a couple swords. Because they sneak into the castle by hiding in suits of armor that are on display. And then when they're walking through, they find some swords laying around. And they decide to pretend like they are Darth Ted and Luke Bill.
That's right.
And they pretend to have a lightsaber fight with swords. Till Bill sort of shoves Ted and he ends up falling down the stairs. And then some of the knights from the castle come in and find him laying down at the bottom of the stairs, stab right through the breastplate of the armor, and Bill thinks that they just killed Ted. So when they're going up the stairs, he hides, and once the coast is clear, he comes out, and then he's going to check on Ted, and the guy that stabbed him comes into the room, into the kitchen where he is, and so Bill attacks him because he killed Ted, that medieval dickweed.
Medieval dickweed.
But the guy ends up eventually overpowering Bill, and when he's about to kill Bill, Ted pops in and hits him in the back of the head with a bone. He boned him. He's a total bonehead. But also, according to that documentary, Alex Winter's favorite part of the movie, the part that he just loved, was just how ridiculous it was that Ted just happened to fall out of his armor when he hit the floor.
Without being seen by anyone else. It was...
Yeah. And the armor was all still completely put together and is completely illogical. But yeah, Alex Winter mentions in there that that's the part that that his favorite part of the entire movie was the fact that Ted fell out of his armor when he hit the floor.
Ted knocks the guy out with the bone. And
he
then
bones him in the head.
To the princesses.
Yeah, and then in order to impress him, Ted is the ladies' man of the two. Bill is very shy around women. Ted is more of the ladies' man. I mean, he did ask Missy to prom when she was a senior and he was a freshman.
And I could get Bill's reluctance as he got older, as he saw his dad.
Yeah, there's definitely some remnants of that in there that completely makes you understand Bill's mindset on the whole thing.
The king comes in.
But first they run into the princesses in the courtyard, and they're trying to impress them. And so Bill doesn't know what to say, so he tells Ted to recite him some lyrics. And so Ted comes out and says, "Oh, beautiful babes from England, for which we have traveled through time. Will you go to the prom with us in San Dimas? We'll have a most triumphant time." I love how he uses time to rhyme with time. And, of course, the princesses are impressed by it, and they instantly fall in love with Bill and Ted, but they can't go with them because they're supposed to marry these royal ugly dudes. So then when they're trying to help the princesses escape the castle, they don't have to marry the royal ugly dudes. Then they run into the king and his
who sentences them
and his
to the
minions.
Iron Maiden.
Yes, who sentences them to the Iron Maiden, which they get excited because they think he's talking about the band. But then
they don't know a lot of history.
Yes, but right after he sentences them to the Iron Maiden, then he just completely changes his mind and he decides he's going to behead them.
No reason. It's just like that.
Because they were just hanging out with the princesses, so I guess that's a death sentence.
So they go to get beheaded, and somehow the executioners...
Yes, somehow the executioners turn out to be Billy the Kid and Socrates.
And Billy the Kid.
Socrates and Billy the Kid got a hold of the executioner's robes and axes, and as the townsfolk are, crying witch, and, they had loaded the phone booth up onto a cart and pull it up right next to where they're being executed, Billy the Kid and Socrates use their axes to cut the ropes that are tying Bill and Ted down, and they escape into the time machine.
This scene, particularly the escape part of it, reminded me of History of the World Part 1.
Yes.
Which is not a time travel movie, but it's similar.
But it is a great movie. It's a Mel Brooks movie, so it's a great movie.
It's a great movie. Anyway.
So it is kind of a time travel movie. I mean, yeah, it's not time travel in the sense of, a time machine traveling through time.
Right, but you're traveling through different periods of time.
The viewer is traveling through time by watching snippets from different eras.
With being the central person in each part of it.
Yes. He's a different character in each part of it. But yes, the viewer is sent through time viewing different eras of history. So in a sense, it's a time travel movie. But back to Bill and Ted.
So, the movie takes its time in that little section, which is fine. It has this nice, drawn up part, which makes sense because they reference the princesses earlier in the movie.
And before, as they're escaping on the cart, getting away from the people that are chasing them far enough to where they can get into the time machine and actually escape. A guy with a Morning Star flail comes down, and for some reason, he stops right outside of it, swings it over his head a few times before he actually swings it at the time machine. I mean, I guess he had to build up momentum, but he ends up swinging it at the time machine as it's dropping into the ground to go through the circuits of time, and he swings it just as the antenna is passing in front of his flail.
Which is important.
Which we don't understand because it's starting to disappear at that point in time. So it looks like he just missed it. But it's an important plot point later.
Because the next thing that happens is the typical 80s montage.
Yes. Every 80s movie had
it.
Collect various historical figures. They get
Joan of Arc, they get Genghis Khan.
Sigmund Freud. They call him Freud.
You get Freud. You get Mr. the Kid.
Yes, Mr. the Kid.
Great.
So great. Miss of Arc. Joan of Arc.
Abraham Lincoln.
Who earlier in the history class, when Ted is asked who Joan of Arc is, he says Noah's wife.
Good answer.
But they get Joan of Arc, they get Genghis Khan.
That's right. They get Beethoven.
Yes, they get Beethoven.
Who really should be instrumental for them.
Who they call Beethoven. They don't pronounce anybody's names right. And they get Abraham Lincoln. That's the one they pronounce right.
Which would make sense. He's one of the most famous American presidents. He's on the $5 bill and the penny. You should hear his name plenty of times to be like, okay, Abraham Lincoln. He's got his face on a mountain, you know.
Meanwhile, so Deacon has taken Napoleon and Deacon's two ladies, his two lady friends. The four of them go bowling.
He kind of, he's like the forerunner of McLovin.
Yeah, he kind of is. Never really thought about that, but yeah, he kind of is. But yeah, so they decide that they're tired of dealing with Napoleon, so they ditch him at the bowling alley because he's a geek.
He's a geek. He's square, and he doesn't know how to let go of a bowling ball. He cheats.
Because that was back when you had to manually write your scores down when you're bowling. They didn't have it all computerized. But yeah, so they ditch him at the bowling alley. He gets kicked out because he doesn't have any money to pay for the bowling. And he ends up at Waterloo, the water slide park.
There's a scene in that there, right? So, obviously, it's new to him. And, somehow he finds a water suit.
Yes, somehow. No, that's just his underwear.
That's right.
That's what he's got underneath his uniform.
So, I like how it's played because, of course he's going to be, cautious about it.
Yeah.
What to do.
Yeah, especially since the first slide he goes on is a tube slide. So it's an enclosed slide all the way down. And he's looking up there. He's real cautious about it because not long before he was sliding through the circuits of time. They're very similar, in look to this slide.
He's a soldier. He's going to want to know what he's getting into.
And so the lifeguard just kind of shoves him into it so that he can get going so the next people can go. And he ends up going through there. It reminds him he's having flashbacks to the circuits of time. And then he ends up loving it. So he's running up, going down as many slides as he can, picking up little kids, moving them out of the way so that he can go down.
That's my favorite part. It's he just politely moves them.
He doesn't shove them. He just picks the kid up, puts him down next to him, and sort of smiles at him.
It's very French-like, right? Very kind of courteous.
Yeah, he doesn't just shove them out of the way. I mean, when he's running up the stairs, he kind of shoves people out of the way. But when he gets to the slide, he very politely picks the kid up, puts him down next to the slide, and then goes down the slide. But yeah, so he ends up loving it, and that's about the time when Bill and Ted have returned to Bill's
before
backyard.
That, they have to repair the signal.
Because they end up...
They get stuck in prehistoric times.
1 million BC, and they just happen to have a backpack full of chocolate pudding and bubblegum.
Well, from the Circle K trip.
Yes, from the Circle K trip. But I'm kind of surprised they bought so much of it when they were there. Because they had a little tin of chocolate pudding for each member of their group. And a stick of bubblegum for each member of their group.
True.
And so while they're all eating their pudding and chewing their gum, Bill is sitting on top of the time machine trying to repair the antenna that it's revealed was damaged when the knight swung the flail at it.
This is another point for anyone that was born probably after the year 1995. People used to have these things on top of their television.
Yes.
And people have antennas now because people are cutting the cords and they want their local channels.
But they look different.
Yeah. They were called rabbit ears.
Back then, there were rabbit ears, but even this wasn't even rabbit ear antennas on top of the time machine, though. It was the antenna on top of the house that you would have, but sort of a version of that.
Twist them around, put foil on things, and try to get reception from the towers.
Yes, so for the broken pieces of the antenna, they're using the little tin cans that the chocolate pudding came in, and then using the bubble gum as glue to hold all the pieces together.
And it works. They're able to fix it. Apparently.
And it's a perfectly working time machine again.
Is definitely not flunking science class.
Yeah. They may be flunking history, but they're not flunking science. Which is where, their intelligence comes into play. They're not dumb guys. They're very intelligent. They just lack motivation to do well in school. But
they fix it. They get back to present day.
Yes, they get back to present day, show up in Bill's backyard while Missy is watering the flowers, and the time machine comes and lands on the hose, which then doesn't allow the water to come out of the hose and surprises Missy. Or then they decide that, they're coming out of this phone booth with all these people, and they decided to give them fake names. You got Herman the Kid, Maxine of Arc. They go through, everybody has a fake name, and then Abraham Lincoln comes out last, and they're like, and Abraham Lincoln.
The one name they get right the entire time.
So then they ask Missy if she can drive them to the mall. And
they have to do the chores.
Like, you have to do chores first. She'll take them wherever they want to go, but they have to do their chores first. So then they have another montage. Another classic 80s montage of all of the historical figures doing the different chores around the house.
Of course, Abraham Lincoln's very, very attentive to it.
Yes.
But all
and Beethoven is loving cleaning the windows.
Yes.
He's having a grand old time cleaning the windows.
Him and that Windex.
Yep. Genghis Khan is cleaning the toilet. He's got the brush. He's brushing it in there. And then he looks at the brush, starts brushing his hair with it.
Seems appropriate. You would think Genghis Khan would be one of I got it.
Yeah.
The Mongol.
Anyway, so they go to the mall, and that first shot
there because they have to realize they need to find.
Yeah, they need to find Napoleon. So they leave everybody at the mall, but before they leave everybody at the mall, they're introduced at the mall while they're going up the escalator. Now, here's something that I didn't notice until this most recent rewatch. I've seen this movie a million times, right? And I did not notice this until just the other day when I was watching it. They're going up the escalator, and, they're going, Socrates, watch out for your robe, dude. Beef oven, don't get sucked under, Well, they're coming up. Everybody's on the escalator. Billy the Kid is riding up on the railing.
He rides up it.
He rides up on the railing like a horse.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never noticed that.
Yeah. It's perfect. It fits perfectly. And then that's it's hilarious because then after that, references before is Billy the Kid and Socrates, which I get because they were really the first two after they got Napoleon that they picked up, right? This entire time that they were spending time with the princesses.
Yeah. So Billy the Kid and Socrates got to know each other.
And then I love their interaction.
Yeah.
At the mall.
The two of them, they're probably my favorite of the historical figures that they pick up because the two of them really form a bond. By the end of the movie, Socrates and Billy the Kid are best friends by the end of the movie.
And they're about to pick up some chicks, and Sigmund Freud comes along.
After visiting the hot dog on a stick place, he comes walking up with a corn dog in his hand. Very Freudian.
Not subtle at all with that image.
Yeah. But, so Billy the Kid and Socrates are trying to pick up these girls, and then Freud comes along and scares the girls away because he's a geek. And then, one of my favorite lines of the movie, after they walk away, then Socrates starts laughing, looks at Freud, and he's like, geek. But so each, as when Bill and Ted go to find Napoleon, Then all the different historical figures split up. They're all in their little groups. They're in their buddies. But really, each of them has a buddy. But Billy the Kid and Socrates are the only ones that really stay together. Everybody else splits off.
Yes. And then, like, chaos kind of breaks loose. But the only person that really might be the one that should be arrested would be Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Because he starts destroying the sporting goods store.
Billy the Kid also, because at one point he fires his gun in the mall. Yeah.
Beethoven's just playing a bunch of
Beethoven
keyboards.
Finds a music store and he starts playing a keyboard.
He's entertaining people.
Yeah.
He is selling their equipment.
He's selling their musical equipment. Yes. And
Joan of Arc is just doing aerobics.
Yeah, she finds an aerobics class. And she shoves the aerobics instructor off the stage and starts teaching the class herself, which, yes, could get her banned from the store, maybe even banned from the mall, but it's not worth being arrested for.
And you would think the photography store would know what their actual costumes would be.
What their props and their costumes are. Because Abraham Lincoln goes and gets his picture taken. And the photographer tells him to give back the Lincoln hat and the jacket. But they're Lincolns.
Get it. We need the drama. I get it.
So, everybody gets into their own little trouble. And, of course, Genghis Khan is in the sporting goods store, replaces his club with a baseball bat. And then starts
knocking heads off mannequins.
Yeah, which he hit the head off the mannequin and it went right into the basket. But so then he's running away from the security guards in there. And everybody else is, they've all gotten in trouble. And everybody ends up...
The person that would make the most trouble would be Genghis Khan.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Mongol. So everybody gets arrested. All the historical figures get arrested. And so once Bill and Ted realize that the only place in San Dimas that Napoleon would go is Waterloo, they go and they find him
because
the water
Napoleon would obviously know to look for Waterloo and wherever he was.
Yeah. In 1988, San Dimas, California.
How they knew to connect Napoleon with Waterloo.
Yeah, which means they at least paid attention somewhat in history.
Yes.
So they got to go break everybody out of jail. So they go to the police station.
Ted's dad's keys come back into the store.
Ted's dad's keys come back into play. Because they determine, when they're trying to get in there, that if they wait until after the history report and they get in the time machine, they can go back in time and steal Ted's dad's keys.
And put them in a specific location.
Which is right where they're standing behind a sign.
But they had to discuss that at that moment before they even stole it.
So then, in order for them to appear behind that sign, they have to remember after the report to go back in time and do it. So,
which amazingly they do.
Yes, because it shows up right there, right behind the sign. It just appears. And so then they run into the same thing when they get into the police station. They're, hiding under a little wall by a desk and trying to figure out how they're going to get past Ted's dad. So Bill gets an idea that they need to remember when they go back, after the report, they need to get a tape recorder so that Ted can record a message to his dad to send him on a wild goose chase.
Apparently they went back to the mall and went to Radio Shack.
Yeah, apparently. Unless they could have had the tape recorder laying around the house.
It's true.
I mean, Bill's dad looked like he might have been the kind of guy who would have a tape recorder. But so they use a tape recorder that just appears because they went back and got it after. So they sneak past Ted's dad and they go and they unlock the cells that the historical figures are in. And as they are sneaking out the window, Ted's dad comes in and starts yelling at Ted. So here's the part that I don't understand. So Ted decides, he's like, remember a trash can. And all of a sudden a trash can appears and falls on Ted's dad's head and, he's trapped in a trash can.
Mm-hmm.
So, the part that I don't understand is, yes, okay, I get that that's just one of the things that they added to the things that they need to do when they go back in time after the report. But it just materializes above his head and drops.
Who drops it?
Exactly. There should be a second Ted there. There should be a second Ted sneaking up behind his dad and putting the trash can over his head.
Which we don't see.
But, so they end up getting back to Missy, who drives them to the school. And they go and the history teacher is about to send everybody home early because Bill and Ted aren't there yet. They're the last ones scheduled to do their report, and they're not there. Then all of a sudden, the lights go down, and spotlights show up. And it's this perfectly choreographed lighting situation.
That's the thing I want to know. Is like, where
this last-minute perfect lighting situation and music and all this stuff. Where
it's like a stage show for an arena rock band.
Yeah. Where, so then Bill and Ted are there and they give their oral presentation and they have each of the each of the historical figures come out and tell what they really think about modern day San Dimas.
Billy the Kid has live firearms within a public school.
He shoots out one of the spotlights. But nobody cares. And then when Napoleon is discussing the Battle of Waterloo, Ted says he doesn't think it's going to work, and Napoleon gets mad. He gets upset, and he destroys the little map model that he made, knocks all the little army men off.
It's a great performance, and Abraham Lincoln helps conclude it. Yeah. They do a great job.
And so when Freud... and this is the one time when they actually get everybody's names right. When they're introducing each one of them. Mm-hmm. They actually say Socrates. They say Sigmund Freud. They say Beethoven. But yeah, so Freud is having a therapy session with Ted. Mm-hmm. Or Ted is having a therapy session with Freud. And so he gets to the bottom of what's been bothering Ted the whole time. You know, his conflict with his dad and all that. And then he looks over at Bill and asks him if he wants to get on the couch. And I love Bill's response. It's like, oh, no, there's nothing wrong with me. Just a slight Oedipal complex. But then the camera pans over to Missy. But yeah, so they go through everybody. Then the presentation ends with Abraham Lincoln coming out and giving a speech. 77 minutes ago, your forefathers set forth on a most excellent adventure through time. And of course,
which really wouldn't be 7 minutes ago.
No, it wouldn't be.
But 27 minutes.
But he ends it with the slogan of the future that came from Bill and Ted, which I don't know why we didn't mention earlier. But yeah, so Abraham Lincoln ends his speech with, be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!
This thing about, to be excellent. Yeah, it's funny seeing Abraham Lincoln say be excellent to each other. But then the party on,
dudes! Yeah, so, so they get an A+ on their history report.
Which makes sense. It's a really well done.
It is a really well done report. And, I mean, you can't discount the fact that they had the actual real historical figures in it.
Who finally go back into their original character.
Yeah. They return everybody to their original times. And Bill and Ted are, again, playing their guitars in the...
struggling.
Or making noise with their guitars in the garage. And
they realize, we should probably actually learn how to do this.
Yeah. We should actually learn how to play.
They had Beethoven. But he wouldn't play guitar, but he could easily teach them music.
But they had already taken him back to his time. But Rufus shows up, gives them some brand new guitars as a thank you for fixing the future. Because, again, we didn't mention earlier that Bill and Ted are the key to world peace. They single-handedly saved the future with their history report. If they're rather not necessarily with their history report, but music. With their music, that they can't write the song that unites the world if they are separated because they failed history.
Because Ted's in Alaska, in military school.
Yeah, so they, he comes in, and it turns out Rufus went back to medieval times, not the restaurant, but the actual medieval times.
Not the restaurant.
And he rescued the princesses from marrying the royal ugly dudes. And he brought them back so that they could be with Bill and Ted. And so they become members of their band.
I saw this weird criticism of the movie about how, they're gifted, these women. Like, no, they didn't want to marry the royal ugly dudes.
No, they didn't want to. They wanted to be with Bill and Ted. They hit it off right away with them. They didn't want to marry the royal ugly dudes. Yeah, so Rufus rescued them and brought them back to 1988. Where
that's what happened.
Yeah. And then Rufus jammed with them. He was the only one in the garage that was actually able to play an instrument.
Kind of strange things, like apparently Bill was supposed to know how to play.
But it was clear that, filming-wise, that George Carlin couldn't play the guitar like that. He was just making the face while somebody else was playing the guitar. It never showed his hands and his face at the same shot.
Nope.
But yeah, so there's the end of the movie.
That's probably going back to it right now. I was watching it again recently. There's a lot of things for being. I mean, it's PG-13. It's like not like it's directed really at kids, but like a lot of the audience, a lot of stuff would go over their heads, especially the historical stuff, like especially like the Freud stuff you're talking about. Yeah. Like especially with Ted on the couch.
Yeah, Ted on the couch.
Like you're saying, like
having
just a minor Oedipal complex.
And Freud in the mall with the corn dog.
There's so much. It's so goofy. It's a lot happening with it, and like And again, like, talk about some of the stuff it harkens toward. Like, it's funny, like, it picks up all these aspects of different 80s movies, not just time travel movies, but sci-fi movies, 80s comedies, for that matter.
Yeah. And what we didn't even mention, before they meet Rufus and everything, when they're in Bill's bedroom trying to put together a history report, they're talking about George Washington. And Bill says, okay, so who's George Washington? And Ted's like, the dollar bill guy. Or no, did Ted say George Washington and then Bill said the dollar bill guy? And then Ted's like, who? Have you ever made a mushroom with his head? And they're like, oh, wait, remember? We went to the Hall of Presidents. What did he say at the Hall of Presidents? And Ted puts one hand on his chest and puts his other arm out. He's like, welcome to the Hall of Presidents.
There's so much going on. Like, there's parts where they seem so, like, clueless like that.
Yeah. But then there's parts where they repair the time machine.
Seems so intelligent.
They MacGyver a fix to the time machine.
That's a great reference, too. You know what? That's, like, even another aspect of it, right? Like, it's almost like a MacGyver fix. It really is a MacGyver fix. Yeah. Like,
they use tin cans,
food,
and bubble gum to fix the time machine. I mean, you can't really get much more MacGyver than that.
And they do it.
And it's in perfect working order after that.
Perfect working order. It's just these little things about it. And, like, it's easy to bypass it for, like, the initial review or, like, about it. Like, a lot of things. But it's so much happening with it. And the other thing I looked into this, the director, Stephen Herrick, right? So his first movie was another 80s movie, Critters.
Okay.
Very kind of 80s sci-fi kind of horror comedy type thing going on, right? He's got a very interesting filmography, okay? The next one kind of falls within this with, like, Bill and Ted. Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen that since, like, 1992.
Yeah.
It was, like, 9.
I've never watched it all the way through. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but it was, early 90s when I watched it, when I saw parts of it.
So I barely remember it. And, I remember when it came out, like, the previews, because the title just sticks out, especially for, like, 9 years old.
Yeah, I can still see the poster.
Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And then
I can see the poster. You got Christina Applegate and the kids standing behind her, and and just these old woman legs sticking up from under the ground.
So the next movie he did after that was The Mighty Ducks.
I didn't realize he directed The Mighty Ducks.
Yes. And the movie after that, so that's 92. So Bill and Ted was released in 89.
Yeah.
Don't Tell Mom was 91. Mighty Ducks was 92. Next year, 93 is The Three Musketeers.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy. Like, The Three Musketeers are kind of like this.
You're talking
a famous story. Like, that's the most recent notable adaptation, probably.
You're talking the Kiefer Sutherland, Charlie Sheen, Oliver Platt, and Chris O'Donnell. Three Musketeers.
Correct. 2 years later, 1995, his next movie was Mr. Holland's Opus.
Wow. He's got an eclectic filmography.
It's really strange. And then after that, 101 Dalmatians, the live action version.
I'm guessing, I was going to guess the live action one with Glenn Close and Jeff Daniels.
And then the last two ones that were really kind of big were Holy Man, which had Eddie Murphy.
Yep.
I remember the previews of it. The movie bombed the box office. Yep. I remember that. And then finally, Rockstar. 2001 with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, with Mark Wahlberg.
Jennifer Aniston. Where he's supposed to be some type of rock star, which also kind of bombed.
Huh. So he hasn't done anything since Rockstar?
Nothing
noteworthy?
Yeah. There's a 2021 movie called Afterlife of the Party.
Oh, I've heard of that. That's the Victoria Justice one, isn't it?
Yes. It was Netflix produced movie.
Yeah. I remember seeing it on Netflix. I haven't watched the movie, but I remember seeing it on there.
I remember this one, which would have been after Rockstar 2002, was Life or something like it.
Okay.
With Angelina Jolie and Edward Burns.
Yep.
Remember Edward Burns was like a thing?
I did see Life or something like it back when it first came out. I have a bunch of sisters, yeah, and one of my sisters was watching it. And so I didn't see the whole thing, but I saw a good chunk of it.
But yeah, most of the, Band a House in 2005. Picture This in 2008.
Wait, is
The
that
Chaperone.
the Tommy Lee Jones Man of the House?
Yes, it was. Along those lines, in 2011, there was a movie called The Chaperone with Triple H.
I think I remember that movie came out.
Anyway.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny.
Was one of the long line of movies that had a wrestler that was in childcare.
Right. And, like, at least, like, The Rock and Vin Diesel had more crossover.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting to track his career. The main part was to just think about how Keanu Reeves ended up launching into this career. And initially, he had a decent success. And, like, Mr. Holland's opus. Anyway.
Yeah.
One of the writers for Bill and Ted was actually one of the writers for Men in Black. So,
yeah, Men in Black, another great movie.
It's a great movie.
Very funny, very smart movie.
Yeah, I need to watch that again. It's been a long time since I've seen Men in Black. Maybe we want to put it on the list.
Yeah, that's one that we should do.
There's a lot of movies that we want to cover.
Yes, there are.
We were talking about this earlier. How those are the movies we want to cover and when to do them. And that's the thing. Like, even with Bill and Ted, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had to do Bill and Ted. I mean, not only is it an amazing movie, but it is the inspiration
so many other
for
historical figures they could have included on their history presentation. There's a lot of movies out there that we have to get to. Yeah. We want to bring them to you and want to talk about them with you because I love talking about movies.
Yeah, so do I.
And
I love watching movies. I love talking about them. And yeah, and you and I have had plenty of we've watched plenty of movies together, and we always have great conversations about them afterwards. And so that's the whole reason why we started this podcast, because we wanted to bring our conversations to the internet.
That's right.
So that other people might be able to participate in those conversations and have fun listening to our views on the movies and our opinions, and maybe feel like sharing their opinions with us.
With us.
That's what the comment section's
for. And, maybe it makes you think, I want to watch that movie. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I just got spoiled for me, but I want to see it.
Yeah. Which is why we try to do a spoiler alert on every episode that we do. Sometimes it's a little bit later into it when we remember to do it. But, in case you haven't seen the movies, we don't want to spoil anything. Even if it's a movie that's been around for 30 years, we still want to. In case you haven't seen it, we don't want to spoil it for you.
I get some of you might be just getting into movies. You're
or we want to give you a warning.
17 years old, and you don't know all the movies that have the massive spoilers.
Yeah.
Even if they don't have massive spoilers, you just want to experience the movie as well. With that, next movie we want to do, that harkens into this theme of time travel, is Back to the Future.
Yep. Back to the Future's next. We're actually going to be, we have said before that, if a movie is part of a series, we won't necessarily do the whole series. But with Back to the Future, we're doing the trilogy. So It's not just the next episode is going to be Back to the Future. The next 3 episodes are going to be Back to the Future, then the Back to the Future Part 2, then Back to the Future Part 3. And our reasoning behind that is because it's all one continuous story.
If you've seen all of them, you really understand why. And if you listen to what we're going to do, you'll probably understand it too.
Yeah, it's not your typical trilogy where each movie is sort of a self-contained story that just happens to take place, one after another. The Back to the Future trilogy is one complete story.
It's linear.
Each sequel takes place immediately after the movie before it, and it's it's one continuous story. So that's why we're going to do all 3 of those.
Because I have a lot of memories about this one. Not going to share it right now.
Yeah.
I have a lot of memories about this trilogy. So, yeah. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So thank you for putting up with us gushing about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and how it is the inspiration for the title of this podcast, Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. And join us next time. Oh, what are you saying?
We just hope that, you can continue to enjoy us on this adventure.
Yes.
Just ride with us as Bill and Ted. Just kind of
we are traveling. We are traveling through the internet, collecting listeners to join us on our cinematic adventure.
I like it.
Just as Bill and Ted traveled through time, collecting historical figures for their history report. So, we hope that you've been having fun listening to everything that we've had to say about these past movies, and we hope that you will stick with us and, maybe you'll learn something about some of these movies that you didn't know before.
That's right.
Maybe we'll learn something from you.
I learned something from Rob tonight, so.
Yeah, and I learned something from Tony tonight. So, yeah. So, join us next time when we will be talking about Back to the Future. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend watching it.
Please, yeah.
I know I would recommend
watching it. It is a total classic.
I know I've said it before about many of these movies that we've talked about so far. It is one of my favorite movies of all time, which that's the great thing about our podcast is we get to pick what movies we do.
What movies we'll watch.
So why wouldn't we pick a bunch of our favorite movies? So, yeah, join us for Back to the Future. Thank you for listening. We will see you next time.
Good night. Good afternoon.